So Liz, there are all these great annual pilgrimages like Coachella and Sundance and South by Southwest and Burning Man, but you've just come back from your annual pilgrimage that does not involve staying up all night at a rave with your mom. Is that right?
I just came back from the Stowe Basketry Festival, which is a pilgrimage. This festival has been going on for, I think, almost 30 years, maybe a little over 30 years. It is a wonderful gathering of brilliant basket makers and just make beautiful art and beautiful functional baskets. And it is just a great week.
That does not sound like a rave, but it does sound awesome. Well, it's a rave of sorts.
It's its own kind of rave. I mean, we are wrestling those reeds and black ash and willow like you would not believe. And there is a significant amount of foul language that is thrown around there.
Wow.
Well, basket making can be frustrating.
From your mom?
Oh, a lot from my mom.
Wow.
Yeah. I said I would drop some of my teachers' names in the podcast. So shout out to Joanne Kelly Katzos and Susan Baxter and all these amazing weavers.
Okay. It's all making sense now.
Yeah, it's great.
Do you want to know what's making sense?
What is making sense?
Well, I look at our podcast analytics every now and then, and I notice this like demographic burst for those in the 70 to 90 category.
Well, I'm just trying to get us out there, Matt.
Well done, Liz. I'm Matt Mervis.
And I'm Liz Radday.
And this is ChatEDU, a podcast about AI in K-12 education. In today's episode, AI for Good, the literacy component we might be missing, we'll examine how U.S. attitudes towards AI and our focus on generative AI may shape our thinking as we potentially miss an important take on AI in our classrooms.
But first, in the news, Matt will switch the focus from AI and writing to AI and reading and the impact of AI reading assistants.
Liz will delve into the key role that labor from developing nations is playing in the Gen AI outputs that we see and their impact on language, most especially the word delve.
Then Matt will tell us about a free generative AI tool from Google designed to support English language learners.
And finally, Liz will unpack a new study that highlights how generative AI affects trust in student-teacher relationships. Then we'll go beneath the surface as we look at how U.S. attitudes towards AI compares to other countries and if our one-sided view or almost obsession around generative AI, all the words and images and videos that are created, crowds out our mental space while other forms of AI are driving amazing advancements in health, energy, the environment, and more. With this perspective in mind, we'll consider if the teams that are writing new literacy statements this summer are actually taking into account all these various forms of AI, and might they be missing some amazing advancements generated by AI.
And Matt, we have some breaking news. But Ahmed, don't worry about the breaking news music.
Yeah, I don't know if it's breaking news, but I did want to share that this is our 10th episode. So we are now 10 episodes deep into ChatEDU. And I know, right? And we're super grateful for everybody who's been joining along. We're seeing the number of listeners and followers grow, which is great. It's interesting. I was curious how many podcasts make it to 10 episodes. And it turns out there's like different kind of stats on this. But according to Amplify Media, only 8% of the 2 million podcasts shows created have created more than 10 episodes and uploaded an episode within the last week. So we made it to 10. We're uploading within a week. So we are now part of what I'm going to call the 8% club.
All right. Love it. Matt, we talk a lot about AI in writing, whether it's teachers using AI to help write lesson plans or students using AI to write their papers. Last week, we talked about AI helping me write my book. The seemingly magical ability to crank out the words is understandably the headline, but what about reading? Are we putting enough attention on the role AI plays with respect to reading?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've been hanging out these days on Substack a little bit, and I came across a really interesting post from a fellow named Marc Watkins on his Substack Rhetorica. He addresses this kind of under-discussed impact of AI on reading skills. Watkins explores the adoption of AI reading assistants like Adobe's new AI assistant or even ChatGPT.
It's interesting, as I know you're pretty deep in the weeds with reading summarization for the podcast, right?
Liz, let's not unpack this part in too much detail, but I'm an older gentleman. I get up kind of early in the morning, and that's typically when I do my reading. I'll scan some different news feeds and different boards. I'm just looking for stories. So Full disclosure, if a headline catches my attention, I copy and paste the entire article and I run it through a custom GPT. Oh my God. We haven't referenced custom GPT in episodes. I mean, people who are doing our coffee or alt beverage drinking game, they must be super dehydrated.
Well, thank goodness for Ethan Malik, because he's the other cue to have a sip of something. And I know we've not gone a single episode without mentioning his name.
Yeah, true. Okay, so back to the custom GPT. The instructions that I give this thing are to provide a summary, key takeaways, relevant statistics, and quotes. It's enormously helpful to let me run through loads of stories and then pick the best ones to surface for the podcast.
Including this story, I assume.
Yes. Sorry, Marc Watkins. But as you know, we both also read the full stories before recording, right? And we don't rely solely on the summarizations. But still, this is just part of the workflow or the reading flow, so to speak. And lots of students are relying exclusively on these Gen AI summarizers.
So what does he think are the downsides of this?
Well, I think first and foremost, there's an impact on reading skills and the correlation between reading and critical thinking and analytical skills. AI reading assistants risk undermining this kind of fundamental reading and analytical skill by prioritizing efficiency and surface level engagement over deep reading practices. Watkins says, and I quote, "When we teach reading as a skill, we're asking students to practice more than analytical thinking through close examination of text. We're inviting them into a conversation with the reader about their ideas."
Yeah, there's a tough irony here, as there's a growing consensus that critical thinking and analytical skills are more important than ever, especially given the tendency of AI models to hallucinate. Without both content expertise and critical thinking, it's much harder to spot the stuff that's just plain wrong.
Yeah, I agree. But these tools are almost custom designed for the way teachers and professors assign reading. I mean, look at Adobe's got this wild AI assistant, right? It's right inside PDF. I think it's like a $5 a month. But here's what it does. It generates summaries, right? Quickly generate concise summaries of lengthy documents, making it easier to understand complex content at a glance. It has intelligent citations. It automatically generates citations, saving you the time and effort when referencing the sources in the work. And we've talked about this one as being a stumbling block for a lot of the Gen AI tools. But here Adobe's like, no, I'll get you right to the correct citation and I won't hallucinate it. And it's easy to navigate. You can navigate through documents more efficiently.
Yeah, I mean, that seems spot on. Where was this when I was doing my doctorate?
Totally.
In my doctoral program, I was assigned tons of reading each week, and truly more than really could be done in a week's time. And the sort of unspoken understanding was that you weren't going to really read everything a professor assigned, especially when you were taking multiple classes. And a skill you had to develop as a grad student / future researcher / future writer was to learn how to skim, summarize, find the big points. And that really is a skill. And not everyone knows how to do that, especially my peers who were non-native English speakers or had learning disabilities like dyslexia. So the flip side of the coin are all these benefits for non-native English speakers, struggling readers, but we have our own Sum It Up activity in our student-facing research pilot, and we're seeing that the students are using it in really cool ways. They are asking for summaries, and then they are also asking some follow-up questions. There was some great examples of students reading about open and closed questions. And so not only were they asking for summaries, they were asking for summaries in their native language and then asking for examples of open and closed questions, either in English or their native language, to check their understanding. So it's really useful, but I understand the flip side of the analytical and critical thinking.
I love that observation. I find myself doing that a lot too. So I'll read the summary. I know the headline. I've done a little bit of a skim. And then I just find myself naturally, the more facile I become with generative AI tools, to start probing. Well, what does this mean? Why does the author think that? I mean, it's it is a shortcut, but it's interesting that it has lit up a whole new pedagogical and analytical process for me personally as I chat with the chatbot about the content. It's curious.
So this isn't really new. This is, when I was in high school, SparkNotes, Cliff Notes, we were using those things. But what we couldn't do was have a conversation with SparkNotes and Cliff Notes. And our teachers knew exactly what we were using. And so they would just ask us questions that you couldn't find in SparkNotes and Cliff Notes. So what does Marc Watkins recommend?
Yeah, a few things. I mean, one is to create some friction, right? He suggests that we slow down the process, create tasks that require close reading, like annotations, reviewing specific quotes, although, as we just said, that Adobe feature can kind of work around that. But still, I mean, getting deep into the content. And then second, a theme that we hear here a lot and we talk about a lot is just raising awareness of the learning downsides, right? Justin Reich does a really nice job calling this bypassing useful cognition. We all, whether it's through ethics instruction or just our own self-awareness for students and parents, we have to realize when we're taking shortcuts and develop a habit to realize when we're taking shortcuts that are in some ways cheating our own development, our own intellectual growth, and our own capacity.
Well, some of those skills we can get with reading for pleasure, right? Where you are slowing down and you are reading just for the enjoyment of reading.
Right. That's a perfect habit. And maybe that habit can be applied in multiple contexts. I think this is early days. We focus so much on writing. And teachers, interestingly, when it comes to students using AI for writing, I think a couple episodes we did our greatest hits list of the ways that teachers are helping to guide students identify when they're using Gen AI for writing. And they've developed all these great strategies. And I think teachers are going to do that here too when it comes to reading. I mean, no one should ever discount teachers' ability to problem solve. Students and technology create new dynamics in the classrooms every year, but they share and they improve their practice. I mean, if they could be compensated for their ongoing dynamic problem solving, we'd see Teslas all over their parking lots, or at least Chevy Volts. All right, Liz, let's talk about your favorite topic, teenagers.
No!
Well, not real teenagers, but rather an analogy to the teen years, right? So we know that large language models like ChatGPT start by ingesting everything. They scrape the internet using this thing called open crawl, and they go from there. In fact, a few months ago, it was revealed that OpenAI scraped over 1 million hours of YouTube videos using an open source tool they developed called Whisper. Can you imagine watching 1 million hours of YouTube?
Probably at about 100,000 in on knitting videos, and my dad is probably close to 1 million on silly cat videos, but it does make me wonder about all the garbage and toxic stuff, both on the internet and in those videos. I mean, if I asked ChatGPT or Gemini a question that's even remotely controversial, it says, as a large language model, I don't talk about blah, blah, blah. So all that has to get cleaned up. It has to go from seeing everything to only sharing a slice of all it has seen.
Right. So that's the teenager part, right? Training a large language model can be seen as a process of learning and maturing, just like a person growing up. In fact, the new rumored Microsoft LLM large language model MA-1 is being led by Mustafa Suleyman, right? That's the person that brought us Pi. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens here. But it's perhaps we don't really know, but it might be in its teenage training years. Maybe it's going through its terrible twos. So here's how we can break it down, right? So in infancy, the large language model is doing its basic training like a baby learning to understand the world around them. Then in childhood, they continue to learn. They start to make connections and recognize patterns in the data, just like a child learning to read and write. In these critical teenage years, at this stage, the large language model can generate text that seems coherent, but it might also include bias or inaccuracies or offensive content, or maybe a teenage kid being rude to their mother.
Maybe.
And sometimes it's making mistakes. But then finally, techniques like reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF, are used to fine-tune the large language model and correct its mistakes and its bad behavior. It's like a parent or mentor guiding the teenager through the process towards a better behavior. And the story of who does this heavy lifting from teen to adulthood is something you've been looking into, and how that process shapes our language today. Is that right?
That's right, Matt. So this is both interesting and a little bit troubling, or maybe more than a little bit troubling. These large language models initially are trained with an immense amount of data, like you said, that aren't really useful until a human or group of humans gives the large language models feedback to help train them. Like you said, fine-tuning, correcting mistakes like a parent guiding a teenager. But it's a time and labor-intensive practice, which means it costs money. So a lot of these really large language models are turning to the global south, quote, where Anglophonic knowledge workers are cheap to hire. So, for example, Nigeria. But here's the issue around some of the words like delve. So in England and the US, delve isn't a really common word. Comparatively, in Nigeria, it's a much more common word to use in business English. So that's how it makes its way into the model.
The mystery is solved. I mean, to me, that word is a constant trigger.
Absolutely. So the problem is, earlier, we pointed out how the overuse of a word like delve can be one of the tells that something was bot-generated, like you just said. And so the result is that some of the AI bot-generated language sounds more like African English, and this becomes problematic because AIEs then gets equated with African English, and we label their language as robotic and non-natural. So it's another example of exploitation and racism that's really troubling.
That's fascinating.
It really is. And it makes us think about, who's training the models and the way the language is going to change.
My recollection is that this is not unique to the large language model companies. I think Facebook and the social media companies have been exposing workers to the global south at very low rates to do some of this kind of toxic cleanup work. So I think Time Magazine actually ran a story on this maybe 6 months ago. But it's something that we all need to understand a little bit better. And even as we think about teaching kids, what does it mean to be literate and how does AI work and what is AI literacy, understanding this whole reinforcement learning from human feedback and how it goes through its teenage years into adulthood, so to speak, to carry that analogy forward really happens because it sounds cute, but there are pretty profound implications.
Absolutely. But let's shift gears to a positive development in the world of English language learners. Well, positive unless you're Duolingo. It sounds like Google has launched a free new tool that uses generative AI to support English language learners. Catch us up on that, Matt.
Yeah, they have. Unfortunately, we can't play with it here, which is a bummer, but Google has launched this thing called Speaking Practice. And essentially what happens is that a user prompts the AI and it gives them a conversational question, right? It just gives them a scenario to think about and they speak. And then there are typical vocabulary words that they're meant to be trying to use in their responses. And the AI gives them feedback, right? The feedback on the learning. And then they do repetition and practice so that folks get more comfortable. So as an example, there might be a scenario interaction. Imagine you're at a restaurant and you need to order food for yourself and a friend will be late. How do you say that to the waiter? Or a problem-solving question. Your friend feels stressed about an upcoming exam. What advice would you give them to manage their stress?
Yeah, that seems like a lot more useful way than the way we teach foreign language in schools. I was a double foreign language major in Spanish and French and did a lot of exercises of conjugating verbs and not as much conversational language immersion until we were quite advanced instead of starting from the very beginning learning conversational Spanish and French.
Right. Context is king. I don't know why we sort of divide and separate out context. It did make me think, because I was so jealous that this was available around the world, but not here. We can almost practice some of what this sounds like right here using some of the voice recognition tools that we have. I don't know, Liz, what were you a double major in what and what?
Spanish and French.
Now that you've bragged a little bit, I'm wondering if we might actually pick up our friend Pi and see to what degree we can replicate this type of a strategy using a tool we have right available to us now.
You're going to make me speak Spanish and French on the podcast?
Yes, I am.
Oh, man. Hey, Pi. I'm a new Spanish learner, and I'd like to practice my conversational Spanish with you. Could you give me a prompt, and I'll answer, and you can analyze my response?
Claro que sí. I'd be more than happy to help you practice your conversational Spanish. Let's start with a simple prompt. ¿Cuál es tu comida favorita? What's your favorite food? Go ahead and respond in Spanish, and I'll provide feedback on your answer.
Mi comida favorita es pollo con azul. No. Mi comida favorita es pollo con... I can't even speak Spanish. My favorite food is chicken.
Great job attempting the response. However, there are a few mistakes in your sentence structure. Here's the correct way to say your favorite food is chicken with rice. Mi comida favorita es pollo con arroz. Remember, pollo means chicken and arroz means rice. It's also important to pay attention to the correct spelling and gender of the words. For example, pollo is masculine and arroz is masculine. Keep up the good work.
Pi, would you believe that she was a double major?
Shut up. It's been 20 years.
Whoa, that's impressive. Being a double major takes a lot of dedication and hard work, so I definitely believe it. And do you know what her two majors were? It's always interesting to see the different areas of study people choose to combine.
Well, even though we're close friends, and she told me 30 seconds ago, I don't know, was it Spanish and French? Whew.
That's totally understandable. Sometimes it can be hard to remember all the details, even if it was just a moment ago. But Spanish and French as a double major sounds like a fantastic combination for a language lover.
Yes, she is a rock star and a basket weaving queen. All right, moving on.
Well, while my Spanish is not up to snuff, her accent is terrible. And I think we've heard every foreign language teacher we've ever used Pi with say the same thing. I mean, polo, it's pronounced pollo.
Oh, now we're catching up. You're like, I couldn't remember that word, and I think I said my favorite dish was blue, but we'll move on. You're right. The teachers have the world languages and foreign language teachers have said that the accents aren't good. But you have to imagine this is going to get better, right? You know, the words are there, the accents are. We'll see when we get access to Google's tool that they're using to support English language learners. But just the ability for this conversational quality. And again, if you're Duolingo out there, you have to really think about whether or not, or really any technology provider, whether or not these just core frontier generative AI models are going to be disruptive to the work that you've done for decades in schools. Okay, finally in the news, Liz, we have a new study out about the impact of AI on academic integrity, which is our nice way of saying cheating. But the real focus is on how this dynamic is impacting the relationships between students and teachers or professors. I'm hearing, I know you are, teachers talk about this everywhere we go. They are frustrated, the students are frustrated, and the problem is that relationships sit at the heart of everything we do in education. It's the reason why AI tutors won't replace teachers. They don't have these authentic human connections. But if the core value in our work is based on relationships, we need to pay super close attention when they're taking a hit, and they are taking a hit. I'm hoping you'll share where we are and, is there any light at the end of this tunnel?
This was a great article because, as you said, trust is just one of those pieces that builds these relationships. And when the teachers and students don't trust each other right from the beginning because of the potential AI use, already the relationship is on a rocky start, and we want to prevent that. So this was a fascinating new study, and the name of the research article is How Does Gen AI Affect Trust in Teacher-Student Relationships? Insight from Students' Assessment Experiences. So this is a qualitative study that allowed 11 students to really talk through their experiences at the university with generative AI and how that is impacting their relationships with their teachers. Students have addressed this problem with generative AI in a few different ways. So some have completely avoided using it in order to avoid the potential for being accused. Although it doesn't mean they still won't be accused of using it, but they have even turned off Grammarly to try their best to avoid any potential for concern, which isn't great because then they're not learning how to use the AI. Many of the students said, which is something we've heard over and over again, is that there's unclear policies on how much is too much. So teachers are saying, professors are saying, you can use AI for idea generation or proofreading or brainstorming, but when does it cross the line into too much? So students are a little worried about being punished for using it. And the other thing that I hadn't thought about until I read it in this study is that if students disclose that they've used it, they're fearful that their professors will think that they are not as smart or not as motivated or are lazy or will grade them down on something versus someone who doesn't disclose that they used it because that makes it look like everything was generated by them. So they're nervous about even disclosing that they use it because of how it may impact the way their professor views them. So the final thought is that students have higher expectations for their teachers, and they expect their teachers to know the capabilities of AI so that they design their assignments and assessments understanding what AI can do. And they really don't like when teachers use AI, but don't let them use AI, because that is just hypocrisy.
So that's got to be where the erosion of, there's the erosion of trust happens at a lot of levels of what you've described, right? They have this anxiety. They're trying to judge what's the landscape, where are the minefields.
Yeah, where you can use it, but I can't. And why can your job become easier, but mine can't? So it was really interesting to think about, how is it being used, and the lack of clarity around policies and how students can use it is something that continues to be really frustrating.
So it doesn't sound like there's light at the end of the tunnel yet. And maybe studies like this can at least elevate the conversation so that teachers and students and school leaders and district leaders can help facilitate conversations. You've highlighted several great stories over the course of the last 10 episodes where we've had students in the middle of the policy and strategy approach around AI. And that seems to, in some ways, be one of the most effective ways to deal with both the relationship piece of this, but also students owning where the guardrails are.
Yeah. I think the light at the end of the tunnel and the positive is when the students and the teachers are both very openly using generative AI and are showing that they are using it even during their lectures, and are acknowledging how they are using it and modeling how it can be appropriately used by the students. And so those are the professors that the students feel the most connection to, because they feel like those professors are living in the same world as them.
Nice.
They're using it, we're using it collaboratively, and here's how you should be using it.
Nice. I love that.
Okay, it's time to go beneath the surface and unpack a possible blind spot as schools accelerate their work on building out AI literacy for students. As we discussed in our last podcast, yes, the jobs, but first the class of 2025, there's a race to help students learn, practice, and master the use of AI in a safe and ethical manner. This is brought on by the reality that using generative AI has become a must-have post-secondary skill, alongside the important acknowledgement that right now, not all students are being exposed to these skills in an equitable manner.
Yes, it's totally evident that students with means and access are becoming fluent in generative AI at a much faster pace than their peers across the United States and probably across the world. And that global perspective becomes important as we think through what it means to build literacy in this important domain. Whenever schools take on a priority, like something new happens, right, Liz, and there's a new curriculum priority, the way that people are looking at that topic is going to frame how they shape the narrative for students and teachers, not to mention parents and administrators. And on this one, there is a lens through which we see this topic. And interestingly, it's different than how other nations are looking at AI. Liz, if you had to guess, what would you say would you say the Americans are more or less positive about AI as compared to other nations?
So I'm going to guess that they're more positive, because from a commercial perspective, much of the early development around AI was U.S. companies, OpenAI, Microsoft, Google. And I know there are competing models in China and Europe, but it seems like we were first to the game, so to speak.
Yeah, that would make sense. But in fact, it does not pan out that way. Americans are more pessimistic about AI as compared especially to India, China, and the East, though Europe is also more down on AI as compared to other parts of the globe. The Brookings Institution found that Americans were less likely than Europeans to believe that AI would improve their lives or the world. A survey from the Pew Research Center revealed that only 20% of Americans had a very positive attitude towards AI, compared to 34% in the UK or 49% in Canada. But I don't know, the Canadians love everything. It must be the poutine. A report by the Boston Consulting Group showed that Americans were less likely than citizens of other countries to trust companies to use AI responsibly.
All right, so that's Europe and Canada, but you also mentioned China and India. So how do we stack up there?
Yeah, there's an even wider gap there. There are a lot of factors to consider. Developing nations may see this as an opportunity to catch up. It's a global economy. AI can be a kind of a power tool to catch up. There could be a demographic factor.
Well, so no offense to my mom and dad, but I'm assuming the older you are, the less likely you are going to be optimistic about this technology, right? And our median age in the United States skews older, so that's going to kind of impact these research studies.
Right. Although we have seen this real anxiety among younger folks entering the workforce. Think about that last episode that we just did on AI in jobs. So while all this seems kind of high level and theoretical, our collective beliefs and attitudes are really going to shape how we define what students need to know and be able to do when it comes to AI. And there's another piece of the puzzle, which is our near obsession with generative AI due to the remarkable and widespread impact of ChatGPT. Literally, ChatGPT and these other large language models are a general purpose technology. They're impacting every facet of our lives, our culture, our politics, our entertainment, and our economy.
That's true. And there's no doubt that this tech, while general purpose, sort of had a bullseye on education. And while it's 1,000% appropriate that we help students understand the technology as it's related to things near and dear to education, like the examples of the risk of hallucinations and the importance of academic integrity, like not letting AI do all your work, the stress generative AI has caused to the system is going to color how we frame these curriculum and literacy development efforts. And the rub is that generative AI is just one part of the field. And for middle and high school students, it's going to be really important that they gain a wider view of AI, given the significant impacts it's going to have on our futures and, in some cases, their own career pathways.
Exactly. I've been running an experiment of sorts during the time that we've just been podcasting over the last several months. And as you can tell, we look at a lot of stories each week in order to pick the 4 that we want to cover on each episode. And on the side, I've been keeping a track of the non-generative AI stories in a tab I call AI for Good. These tend to be news hits and studies about how AI is advancing medicine, food security, the environment, energy, and the like. Some use a bit of generative AI, but most are other forms of machine learning and the use of analytical AI tools to process massive amounts of data.
But that's not always a good thing, right? I mean, the use of machine learning and analytical AI can be used in a negative way when it comes to healthcare decision-making, criminal justice, employment. I'm about to read Unmasking AI, My Mission to Protect What is Human in a World of Machines by Joy Bolamwini.
And her work is really, really important. And she's featured in a documentary called Coded Bias, which is out on Netflix right now. It is a must-watch. But we can't lose sight of the upside too, right? So let me take you on a quick tour of my thought experiment. And again, this is just me casually curating stories over the last few months. In each case, I'm going to share a title, a quick overview, and the type of AI that the system might be using. All right, here we go. Engineers use AI to wrangle fusion power for the grid. This is cool. This is from Princeton University. The instability in fusion is tricky, and it makes it hard to do fusion. And they've used deep neural networks and reinforcement learning to figure out how to stabilize the plasma to allow that to happen. All right, next one. Generative AI will be designing new drugs all on its own in the near future. This, as the headline says, is actually using a little bit of deep learning, but also Gen AI because I don't know how, it's basically hallucinating different molecular structures to come up with creative expressions and combinations. All right, here's a food one. AI's role in mitigating global food prices through enhanced agricultural efficiency. Here they're using predictive analytics and machine learning to optimize farming techniques and supply chain logistics. Here's another one for the environment. Seeds is a generative AI tool that rapidly produces multiple weather scenario and it assembles them from a limited amount of data. So they're actually predicting different potentially destructive weather scenarios from large data sets. AI revolutionizes National Guard disaster relief. Here they're using machine learning to analyze aerial images from disaster zones, identifying and labeling damaged infrastructure, and swiftly aiding in the efficient disaster response recovery. And this last one cuts close to home because my power went out not too long ago. Enhanced grid stability. AI innovations enhance grid stability to prevent power outages. AI models forecast electricity demand to manage grid scale and battery storage, trying to mitigate against the possibility of power going out. Has that ever happened in your little corner of the world in New Milford?
Yeah, we are both in rural areas where the power does go out.
Yeah, so underneath a bunch of these, right, hopefully those headlines just give you a snapshot that there's all these ways in which other forms of AI are helping address issues around health, the environment, food, the power grid, so on and so forth. Underlying many of these developments is Google DeepMind's early and persistent work with a thing called AlphaFold. Liz, in our last episode, you caught folks up on AlphaGo from DeepMind. Can you catch us up on this AlphaFold?
Yeah, AlphaGo was really about a game, but AlphaFold is a little more groundbreaking and applicable in the real world. So this is an AI system that can accurately predict how proteins fold into 3D shapes, which determines their functions. So it uses similar techniques to DeepMind's AlphaGo system that mastered Go, the game. But instead of learning from gameplay, AlphaFold learned by training on databases of known protein structures. And by evaluating potential 3D folds based on physics principles, AlphaFold solves the extremely difficult protein folding problem. And so this breakthrough technology is already accelerating biological research and can lead to major advances in medicine, sustainable technologies, and our understanding of life itself.
Yeah, so what's interesting about the timing here, just as we were preparing to put this particular podcast episode together, Google's DeepMind released AlphaFold 3, and they're making it publicly available. So this is just the next iteration of their AlphaFold AI technology, which is not writing essays, it's solving hard problems that we really need students, teachers, parents, and administrators to understand. So in this case, it's doing things like accelerating the discovery of drugs or antibiotics and vaccines, developing more resistant crops and improving food security, tackling environmental pollution through innovative strategies, materials development, creating sustainable, biorenewable materials to reduce reliance on non-renewable resources. And they're making this publicly available. It's kind of an open source strategy, including this AlphaFold server that will let scientists and technologists leverage this technology in positive ways.
This is wild and so encouraging.
It is. I recently heard this interview with Nick Thompson, who is editor of The Atlantic magazine, and he was talking about generative AI and these other forms of AI. And he came down to this kind of really interesting, slightly aggressive statement to say, I wish people were working more on AlphaFold 3 and less on AGI or artificial general intelligence, which is the slightly obsessive focus of OpenAI, trying to create AI that's smarter than every human being.
All right, so as always, we're going to try to share a handful of recommendations for teachers and school leaders as it relates to our Beneath the Surface topic. So let's kick these off with expanding AI education beyond generative AI. I think that's the whole point of this Beneath the Surface dive, is that we need to diversify the AI curriculum to include various technologies beyond generative AI. So introducing units that explore AI applications in healthcare and environmental science and other fields to demonstrate AI's broad capabilities. It's not just a fun write your homework tool.
Yeah. So second, incorporate AI for good case studies. Regularly use these case studies in the classroom to showcase AI's positive impact on global challenges like health, climate, public safety. This will help students understand the potential benefits of AI technologies.
We want to encourage critical thinking on AI impacts. So engage students in critical discussions and projects that evaluate the ethical considerations, potential biases, and societal impacts of AI. So encourage them to consider both the positive and negative aspects of AI applications.
Fourth, initiate community-based AI projects. Can't do this everywhere, probably not in my little corner of the world, but certainly in larger urban centers or suburban centers, fostering partnerships with local organizations, nonprofits, universities that use AI to address real-world problems. These projects can provide practical learning experiences and connect the classroom learning with real-world applications.
And Matt, I'm going to push back on you a little bit. I think that even in your corner, there have to be practical applications of AI. And in fact, maybe students and teachers can help educate the community on how to use AI in their fields. So I'm going to push back on that.
Taken.
All right. And then the last one is to provide focused professional development. So offering professional development opportunities for educators that cover diverse AI applications and strategies for integrating AI education across various subjects. We've done lots of PD on teaching teachers how to use AI in their jobs and in the classroom and what to look for, but maybe teaching them more about what else AI is doing out there, because if they don't listen to our podcast, they're missing out. And now it's time for Chat Back, where we answer a question from a listener. Today, we are returning to our Spring 2024 conference attendees who asked some questions live in Bethel, Connecticut.
Yeah, hi, my name is Mike Schnelia. I'm from Ridgefield High School. I'd like to know, what is the best way to explain AI to high school students?
That's a great question, Mike. I mean, it's a complex topic. At the simplest level, you could say that AI is the ability of a computer to think and learn so that it can perform tasks that are typically done by people.
Yeah, I think the important thing is helping them understand that AI is not just generative AI. It was not invented with ChatGPT. It didn't just come into the world in November of 2022. It's been in apps and used in ways that kids are using it all the time, whether it's Waze for navigation, Spotify and Netflix that are curating the content that you see. It's just built into so many systems that they already are familiar with, and helping them understand that they are familiar with it and that it is out there in so many different ways.
Yeah, and hopefully this episode in our Beneath the Surface helped widen the lens a little bit, because yes, it's super helpful in all sorts of ways in our consumer lives, but also AI is really doing some remarkable things in this larger category of AI for good, using machine learning and analyzing large data sets to help support health, the environment, medicine, food security, and the like. But let's come back to our friend Pi. I feel like Pi, has been kind of marginalized by Lee from Australia. We wanted to bring Pi back. So we actually got 1,000 listener emails saying, "Where's Pi?" No, it's not true. All right, Pi. Hey, Pi, let's keep it short, sweet, and to the point, but what do you think is the best way to explain artificial intelligence to high school students?
For high school students, I'd recommend using a combination of analogies and real-world examples. 1, describe AI as a smart computer program that can learn from data and make predictions or decisions. 2, use examples like facial recognition, virtual assistants, or self-driving cars to show AI in action. 3, simplify complex concepts like machine learning by comparing it to how humans learn from experience. This approach should make AI more relatable and easier to understand for high schoolers.
Thanks, Pi. It's good to have you back. We've missed you.
My pleasure, Matt. It's great to be back and helping you out with all your questions. As always, I'm just a chat away.
Okay, nice one, Matt. It's great to be back from making baskets and jumping right back into making podcasts. We have a few more thematic podcasts coming up before the school year wraps up, and we have some really engaging episodes for the summer, including interviews with students and school leaders. Please keep listening. As always, we'd love to hear what you think, so please let us know, and don't hesitate to send us a question for Chatback at chatedu@edadvance.org. And also, rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you are using. ChatEDU is brought to you by EdAdvance, the nonprofit regional education service center in Litchfield, Connecticut. ChatEDU is recorded, edited, and produced by Ahmed Malik, whose dedication and expertise bring our discussions to life. ChatEDU's executive producer is Cameron Audia. Additionally, we are grateful for the support of our colleague Gary Robinson. Gary is the ChatEDU Design and Outreach Ginsu Knife, and we appreciate his time and talents. And of course, a big ChatEDU shout out to our fearless leader and incoming executive director, Jonathan Costa, for inspiring the pod. Finally, a heartfelt thank you to our listeners for joining us on this journey exploring the thoughtful and innovative integration of AI in education.
See you next time.
Bye.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Costa, and I am the Executive Director at EdAdvance. On behalf of Matt and Liz and our entire agency, I want to thank you for listening to our ChatEDU podcast. We will be dropping episodes weekly for the rest of this school year, and then we will go to a special AI news breaking news schedule for the summer, looking for in-depth episodes to return in the fall of 24, along with a community of practice and a new micro-credential as well. Take care, and thanks again, and tell your friends about ChatEDU.